All right, Aquarius. So the way that these two showed up brings up that old saying, running around like a chicken with your head cut off. And unfortunately, with the way they showed up, I think that some of you may be running yourselves down to the ground to the point where you may be feeling a little bit ill. But I'll explain here. So from Halloween, you pulled Lady de los Muertos. God help me, I hope I said that right. Acceptance and equality. But then from Hidden Realms, you pulled the Resting Tree as a challenge. Patience and stillness. So now Lady de los Muertos talks about how there needs to be acceptance of, the whole life and death cycle, that it's a natural process. But beyond that, it's talking about how you need to choose to be more life affirming, and that you need to take a lighter approach to situations to help it work out a little bit better for you. But it's also talking about, if you're holding on to something that does not serve you, that you need to let it go, simplify and let go. But the problem is with the Resting Tree as a challenge, it says that a lot of you may be really stressed out right now and frantically trying to overdo things, get them done. It says that running around and overdoing anything makes you into a human, quote unquote, doing, and not a human, quote unquote, being. And it's saying that, if you continue to do this, you may become ill. But it's saying that you need to take time to be still and meditate, obviously, here. But it says, don't worry, all things you're trying to manage will still be there when you're ready to move forward again. But you have to be... All right, Aquarius, here is your overall for the week. Ugh. And, again, right, like talking about illness and then having the Three of Swords as the overall. One of the things that they talk about with this one, beyond heartbreak and separation, betrayal, and all that crap, you're talking about like minor surgeries. But yeah, like I don't feel good. And again, right, like it's not going to be for all of you. And even if you are dealing with, the heartbreaking situation right now, it may actually be making you physically like ill and drained. But now with the Three of Swords being the overall, though, you're also talking about, needing to get to that place of forgiving, right? And letting go. But we'll see. Now, in the past, the Seven of Cups, I don't see this as you fantasizing about anything. I think that there may have been an expectation on the way a situation was going to work out, and clearly it didn't, with the Three of Swords being the overall. But now on the other hand, right, you can simply be saying here that there may have been like several different options possibly on how to treat an illness. I am getting that. But then the other thing though too is, it could have been that you had an expectation on something that, you have chosen here, but it didn't exactly go the way that you had expected. In the present, the King of Swords, and and I've always said, to me, this seems like Aquarius. Now, definitely it could be because of you dealing with a person here that this is surrounding you in the present moment, right? In another air sign. But, as you, I've always seen the King of Swords as somebody who is very clear, very logical. It's not that you're looking to give a harsh, cutting truth here, and there isn't the kind of like coldness and bitterness of the Queen. But, it could be that some of you are not really paying attention to your emotions anymore because of, an expectation not working out. I kind of feel like that too, but I'm waiting to see what's happening here. Now, future conditions, the Hangman. So trying to get that enlightenment. When I see this Hangman, I think of being bound to a situation, trying to get some clarity. I think that in the present moment, you're there, but there are, parts of what has happened here that still got you in this state of, there's more here that you need to see. There's more, right? And I think you understand that, especially with the King of Swords being there. But it could also suggest that, somebody is putting you in this state of limbo, right? We could definitely be talking about possibly, you know, waiting on different options as far as health issues go. I keep going back to that, and I don't know why. It's probably because of the way that I felt about the resting tree, and then looking at the Lady of Death, you know, and needing to simplify things. But this to me is like nothing can really move forward quite yet, you know, and nothing can really get you to the point where this is relieved. I feel like needing relief and kind of like waiting on that. Your best path to follow, the Page of Wands. Here's what I'm going to say on this. The very first thing that I'm getting on this is with the Page of Wands being your advice. If there is something, you know, new that is being presented to you that may help in this situation and get you out of this, then maybe you need to look at an option differently, and needing to, you know, go forward with enthusiasm, even though there isn't, you know, a lot of understanding about what's going to happen later. You know, when you look at the Page of Wands, it's about moving forward with excitement and optimism. It's hearing good news, which is fantastic, but it's also about, you know, doing something where you don't really have a lot of experience, right? So I kind of get that from this, needing to be a little bit more open to, you know, new things that there isn't a lot of information on. Oh boy. All right. So in your environment, Temperance. And you know, it's funny because every time this one shows up, as beautiful as this card is, a lot of people say, I'm sick of seeing that. And I don't blame you. Right? Nobody wants to hear you need to be patient, right? But then I also go back to, you know, the cards and think you need to get your equilibrium back, you know. But I'm looking at the King of Swords, and I don't feel like, you know, this is the person who is responsible. You know, if anything, if you are dealing with a person here, they may be, you know, doing research here because he's looking at the book, right? And maybe trying to help you get a little bit more balance back, you know, and that is definitely in terms of a health situation, you know, and again, that's only going to be for some of you, but that one is like pushing on me. But, you know, I look at it and I think that, you know, for some of you, you know, it's about you. It's about you getting back to a place where, you know, you're not totally negating your emotions, because I look at this and, like I said, you know, whether you're male or female, I look at this as Aquarius. So if this is the energy that you're taking on, I mean, it's great to be clear mentally and think logically about a situation, but it's not always the best thing to totally push your emotions aside and not be open to feeling something, especially if you've been through a difficult situation, you know. And I look at this and I think, you know, well, that didn't work out the way that I thought, you know, and then moving into this place, well, forget it. I'm not going to get my hopes up. I'm not going to allow my emotions to become involved anymore. But this, to me, in your environment is saying that there needs to be that balance between, you know, your heart and your mind. Wow, Aquarius. Oh, I'm telling you, I don't know what the hell it is about this one, but I feel like, and this is only going to be, like I said, for some of you, you know, again, general messages here, and this could definitely be a person that you're dealing with. It doesn't necessarily have to be you, but looking at the Four of Swords as hopes and fears, this is resting, you know, recuperating here, you know, getting your thoughts in order. You know, but I always see the Four of Swords, you know, beyond the cutoff in communication and non-action as one of those things where sometimes we need to find our own personal oasis, so to speak, right? You know, and rest. Oh my God. It's so funny because I'm just now remembering, I was sitting at my desk earlier and there's like a little fortune cookie thing. And I don't know if one of the boys put it there, but it said today is going to be like a spa relaxing day for you. And then of course there's the lucky numbers on the back. Wow. Yeah. So some of you are just needing, you know, to take a break here, rest and recover. But then I also feel like too, You know, the other thing with the Four of Swords is, you know, calling a truce. You know, calling a truce with not just yourself, but with the situation that you may have been through, looking at the Three of Swords. Wow. Aquarius, what the hell? Oh my God. All right. And then coming out the Seven of Swords, you know, that one bothers me. You know, but this could very simply be that there are things that you're not wanting to talk about. And, you know, if you can't call that truce, it's kind of like, well, I'm just going to take what I can and get the hell out. Now, this could definitely be about, you know, dealing with people who are being sketchy and sneaky, right? And they're keeping you in this state of limbo. And this is why we're looking at the Three of Swords. But, you know, to me, especially if we're talking about health, it's almost like somebody doesn't know. You know, we're not talking about this just yet, you know. But then I still go back to the Page of Wands, and I think that for you, it's really, you know, needing to take action here to take a new path and not, you know, have to revert to situations where you feel like you have to do this, or, you know, not keeping yourself in a state of limbo because of a person and then ultimately just end up dealing with the same thing again, you know. And I'm looking at the sevens, right? All right, so when we're looking at the Eight of Pentacles, you know, again, as a clarifier here is past, present, future, I'm looking at, you know, you putting in a lot of time and effort here and busting your ass towards something that you had an expectation toward, and it didn't work out. It didn't. Not with the Three of Swords being there, you know. And then, you know, with the Seven of Swords, it could absolutely be because you're dealing with somebody who's deceived you. But I don't know, there's a part of that that makes me feel that this is about you. This is about you now, you know, no longer, you know, allowing yourself to be in this state of limbo, waiting on somebody else, waiting on something to happen. And you're just like, you know what, I'm done. You know, I'm just going to skip out here and not say a word. Now, with the Tower and then looking at the King of Swords and Temperance, you know, this could definitely be a situation that is, you know, drastic, sudden change, especially for you internally, right? Where, you know, when things don't work out, especially when you have expectations, it's like everything just comes crashing down around you. Which, you know, would make sense why we're looking at Temperance here. Now, with the Hermit, though, and coming out, again, it's almost like, I just want to be left alone. Just leave me alone for a minute with my own thoughts. You know, and it's really about you seeking that enlightenment, though, too, right? But it's almost like I really can't deal with other people and other people's thoughts and opinions right now, is what I'm getting from that. Wow, Aquarius, you know, and like I said, this is only going to be for some of you, but, you know, I'm looking at that Seven of Swords and thinking, you know, I can't keep putting time and effort into things that aren't going to work out the way that I expect them to. You know, it's just causing these situations where everything is falling down around you. I want to be left alone, you know. Whew. All right, let's take a look at the soul trees and see what other messages there are. You know, and I'm not intentionally like trying to read this in a negative tone. It's just that with the Three of Swords being there and then looking at the Seven of Swords coming out, you know, the positive here would be that, you know, you're doing what you need to do at whatever cost here to get, you know, your own balance back, even if that means you need to just shut everybody out for a minute because you can't deal with these kinds of situations anymore. You know, so it's not necessarily like a really negative outcome here. It's just you're looking for enlightenment here. Not dealing with heartbreaking situations, doing what you can to, especially on, you know, health issues here, doing what you can to think about what your options are. But I look at the Page of Wands and I think, you know, if you're talking about dealing with situations that have, you know, broken your heart and devastated you almost, it's really about picking yourself up now. You may not know what lies ahead, but there needs to be like new enthusiasm and new excitement when it comes to taking a completely different path. You know, but I feel like right now that's kind of hard for you to see because you're needing to kind of like And then honor yourself. Wow. Yeah. And again, that kind of goes back to the whole thing of, dealing with these situations, right? And it's not that the Seven of Swords is a bad way to be. First of all, I don't think that you are trying to intentionally deceive anybody. I don't think that has anything to do with it at all. I think it's more so, you know what, I'm done. I need to just walk away now, and leave this behind. And it's almost like you're doing it in a way where it's like just shutting everybody out. But, honestly, sometimes we need to have those moments, right? And I don't think that you're trying to hurt anybody. Now, this could definitely, though, be about, the deception that you've been through. But again, I go back to needing to find your own oasis, and then you have tranquility. And the only way to get tranquility is to just allow things to unfold, but honor yourself and honor, what is important to you. And when you look at honor yourself and you're looking at temperance, yeah, you're more important. You and your health and your state of mind is more important right now. But you have to do you. You've got to do you, boo, right? Like I've always heard that before. And however it is that you feel like you need to do that, then so be it, right? Because it's all about you right now, honoring yourself and finding some tranquility. Look at your pattern in relationships. Oh, and I've seen this one before too. I can't think who it was pulled this. It requires inner strength to recognize that you need to change or modify your behavior. And it's not that you're doing anything wrong in relationships. It's just that, how do I explain this? We tend to have like a certain way of acting and thinking when it comes to jumping into relationships. I, for example, immediately look at what is going to cause the ending of it. Right? Which is a bad pattern. There's no reason to do that, but it just seems to be the thing that I do, right? So it's not that you're doing anything in particular that's really bad. It's just that, your behavior is leading you into these relationships where you have the same outcome over and over and over again. And it's saying that despite the fact that this may have happened again for some of you in relationships, that, you can't give up or lose faith on love in general, But man, Aquarius, this one, I do think is going to have like a health undertone for some of you. Be careful about, the way that you think and the way that you feel about your health right now. And it's funny because I swear that the same thing came up before, like not that long ago, and I used a different oracle deck where you needed to pay attention to your health. Just be mindful of what you're doing and how it's affecting you and your body. Not only that, but your state of mind. But you have to do you. You have to do what is going to bring you that tranquility. All right, Aquarius, so my apologies for the late upload here. There were some technical difficulties, and I had to go back and redo some of these afterthoughts for you guys. But I'm looking back on this, and I have to be honest with you guys. I'm feeling like crap and feeling like nothing is making me feel better looking at this reading. But I do think, beyond the health issue here, I do think that for some of you, you may have had an expectation about a certain situation and it didn't exactly go the way that you had thought. And then I do see this as you with the King of Swords and looking at Temperance and thinking some of you are like done, right? Like you're done looking at, the emotional thoughts behind, possibly a person here, and you're being, more critical, but not like cutthroat as the Queen of Swords. But then with Temperance, I'm thinking, just be balanced. Don't, allow yourself to become imbalanced because of, the situation that you've experienced. Now, looking at the Hangman, though, and again, going back to the health thing, I'm like looking at this and somebody researching, all there's possibilities here, and this period of like waiting and possibly there being new things that don't have a lot of information on them because of the Page of Wands. But anyway, right, my problem here is looking at this in terms of dealing with somebody who may have hurt you or betrayed you, right? with the Seven of Swords coming out on this, you know, and then going back to look at your pattern in relationship, you know, it's like you consistently are going into situations where this is happening, right? But then I also think that for you, it's like, you know what, I'm done waiting here. I can't keep, you know, keeping myself bound to the situation. I kind of just need to go, right? Because I also look at this as you need to do you. And especially with the clarifiers here, because it's like, you know, I'm tired of putting time and effort into things that just come collapsing down around me. Just leave me alone, with the Hermit being there. That's what I feel like. And then you needing to get to this place of, again, tranquility. You know, but regardless of everything that's going on, I'm looking at your advice and thinking, you know, you can't let this stop you from having, you know, a passion for life, you know? But I also see that as, you know, good news coming through though, too. You know, but are you like shoving it out? You know, because you need to spend some time with yourself, which is not a bad thing. You know, I'm not really seeing it as like a horrible thing, but I am seeing, you know, you possibly being in the same situation again, looking at the Seven of Swords and the Three of Swords. And like I said, I'm like not intentionally trying to look at this in a bad way. It's just the gravity of it is like, ugh, you know, and then I look at these and think, especially in terms of health, right? Needing to let go of the things that don't serve you anymore, but then also needing that moment to be still, you know, to be still, to recuperate here, to recover, you know, and then I look at tranquility, needing to allow things to unfold and needing to honor yourself, right? But then as far as relationships go, like I said, with love endures, despite the fact that you've gone through this, it doesn't mean that that's what love is always going to be like for you. And look at your patterns in relationships, you know, it's just saying that you need to look at, you know, what are the patterns that you follow when it comes to relationships, because that can point you in the right direction, is to seeing why you continuously end up in the same situation over and over again. It's not necessarily that you have bad habits, but they could be if you continuously attracting what you don't want, right? But I still feel like looking at this coming out that it's time for you to do what you need to do, even if that means that you're just going to walk out. You know, I need to walk out on this situation because I'm tired of working on this, you know, and it may be sudden and drastic, but, you know, even with the Hermit, besides the whole leave me alone, I don't think that it's you going into isolation. I think it's more about, you know, needing a moment of solitude, absolutely. But then also, you know, looking at that star and that lantern going, you know, what was it that I actually wanted? You know, and then not only that, but looking at everything that you've experienced, right? Going the 1 through 9 and having that better understanding here. But like I said, when it comes to health situations, just be careful about pushing yourself to the breaking point or allowing other people and situations to put you in this place where you feel ill and like dragged down. You know, just be careful of that. But do what is necessary for you to find some peace and stillness and that tranquility.